Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Now, at the QRC Leadership bootcamp that we would have broadcasted a little while ago, more than one person they referenced using love as a definable tool for business. And this would have come out of a session with co-author of Love as a Business Strategy, Resilience, Belonging, and Success, Mohammad Anwar. And he's also the president and CEO of Softway. So we're going to have a conversation with him now. Stay tuned for that. Mr. Anwar, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself, DK?
I'm all right, thank you. Looking forward to this conversation. But even before we get into the book, give us an idea of what Software is about, thank you, in terms of an overview.
Sure. So Softway originally started off as a technology firm 20 years ago, but over the course of the 20 years, we've morphed into becoming something more than that. So today we're a consulting firm in the business of transformation, where we help transform organizations culturally, technologically, or from a communications and change management standpoint. So we bring all of those transformation services together.
And looking at that transformation, looking at change, there was a day in 2015 that you described as your darkest hour. I want you to take us through that a little bit, please. And also let's start with that and then we continue.
Sure. So as I mentioned, started my company 20 years ago when I was still in college pursuing my computer science degree. And I was 20 years old at the time, so fairly young, starting off a business. And I'm an immigrant to the United States. And so this was like pursuing my American dream. And within 10 years, I believed I had hit the pinnacle of success, had over 300 employees, and I was living the American dream, driving my fancy cars, flying planes across Texas. But in 2015, our business was on the verge of bankruptcy. We were hemorrhaging cash, losing employees left and right. And I had to go through what most companies would do as a regular business practice, which is to do layoffs. So in 2015, I had to make a very difficult decision to lay off almost 1/3 of our workforce, about 100 employees all in one day. And we did so in a very dehumanizing manner. And I take full ownership of it, but I'm still reeling from the fact as to how it went down and how dehumanizing it must have been for my colleagues at the time. And so at that moment in time, I pretty much lost all my confidence of being a CEO. I didn't know if the doors of Software would remain even a month longer open. And in a deep moment of introspection, through a series of events after that, I realized that what was happening with their business wasn't the economic conditions, wasn't our customers, wasn't our employees. It was actually my fault. I was extremely greedy. I was selfish, and I cared only about my well-being. And I had created an environment of fear where it was my way or the highway. And as a result of that, I almost destroyed our business. And that's what came out of the darkest day.
But looking at that, and there would be individuals who say to themselves, there has to be a different way. But thinking about it and actually finding it can be very much distinct from each other. What is it that led you to discover that you can actually focus on individuals and do better as a company, even keeping the bottom line involved?
Yeah, I came across the concept of love as a culture through American football. A few weeks after my layoffs that I had done at Softway, I had the opportunity to go to an American football game where I witnessed a miraculous comeback victory, which was a comeback for the ages for my University of Houston alma mater football team. And when I witnessed that, I was very inspired to see how a team that had 0.1% chance to win that night ended up winning that night. And I was very inspired by their resilience and their comeback victory. And I started to envision Softway's own financial comeback as a result of witnessing that. And so I followed through on the head coach of the football team because he had done a really pretty big turnaround of that football program in his first year as a head coach. And in one of the press conference, one of the reporters asked him what had led to the resiliency and the comeback victory of that football team that night. And it's what he said that kind of introduced me to this concept and changed my whole mindset. He said it was love. It was the love and support that the players had for one another that helped them go on the field and win that night. And he began to expand and say, it's not the love you bro, love you dog kind of love, but it's a genuine, you have my heart in your hand kind of love. And that's the kind of love that not only helps you win games like Saturday night, but helps you build championship level teams, because the players go on the field not to fight for themselves, but fight for the brothers next to them. And so as he was saying all of this, my mind began to explode. And I began to ask myself, do I love my team? Do I care for my team the way Coach Herman was describing? And the resounding answer kept coming back that it wasn't. And so in that moment, I committed to go on a journey to strive to become a leader that leads with love and create an environment where people are empowered to learn, grow, make mistakes, forgive one another, thereby creating an environment of resilience and belonging. And through this journey and lots of trial and tribulations, we've been able to realize that when you do put people at the center of all business decisions, you're not pitting people against profit. You're actually helping people be enabled and empowered to make profit for your corporation, for your business. And we have not only been able to do that at our own organization, but help several other corporations, large and small, that operate at a multinational capacity to be able to incorporate these values and behaviors of culture of love. And they have seen their business performance, shoot up and make it in a way that is sustainable and it's not just short-lived. And so that's what gave birth to the concept of love as a business strategy. And we are seeing that there are a lot of organizations out there that have already been doing this, and then there are a lot more that have to go on this journey of incorporating a people-centric culture like culture of love.
And we're having this conversation, Mr. Anwar, and I'm thinking of the foreword to the book Love as a Business Strategy by Maggie McClurkin. And it I'm remembering what you're saying in terms of the way that you are able to take ownership and apologize. It seems as though this is something that heads of businesses don't necessarily do because they're always kind of being right. So, but that soft skills are kind of having their day in the sun, so to speak. Empathy, vulnerability, admission of not being the end all and be all in terms of that frontal knowledge. Why now? And in your case, how does that make the difference? Because not everyone is necessarily willing to ask themselves that question objectively over and over again, especially if they don't necessarily like the answers.
I think, I was of the same mindset, which is, leaders have to set the tone. They have to be right. We can't show any sign of weakness. We can't admit to our mistakes because then it makes us weak as a leader. And it may have been because I've been raised in a environment where, leaders are always right and worshipped and looked up to, so they cannot be fallible. And coming from a culture where men admitting to weakness is not masculine enough. And I think all of those mindsets or belief systems had been built into my head, like many other leaders around the world. And it wasn't until I realized that it was just too burdensome for me personally to carry on that lie or carry on this facade or iron jacket I had to wear to go into the workplace and pretend to be someone I'm not. It was just too much burdensome for me to be someone I'm not and pretend to be this amazing leader.
And I think this is where we take a short break. We are coming back with more. We're speaking with co-author of Love as a Business Strategy, Resilience, Belonging, and Success, Mohammad Anwar. Stay with us. We'll return after this. Welcome back. We are speaking with co-author of Love as a Business Strategy, Resilience, Belonging, and Success, Mohammad Anwar. And we're seeing your t-shirt, Culture Plus. And I wanted to ask about that, Mr. Anwar, because yes, there's a saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, but you continue in the book saying that behavior eats culture for lunch. Expound on that, thank you.
Sure. So when we were in our quest to change our culture or strengthen our culture after our layoffs and our darkest day, we began to try and do research and learn about other organizations, particularly technology organizations in the Silicon Valley, such as Twitter, Uber, Facebook, and how they had instituted their culture. And so we took a tour of their facilities. And upon touring all three of those organizations in one day, we saw, a bunch of swag like t-shirts, caps, shoes being thrown at us, and then food being served to the employees, cooked by Michelin star chefs, down to ice cream parlors, t-shirt printing press, and even yoga on campus being available for their team members. And we realized at the time that what we thought was culture was actually not culture. That was actually perks and benefits that these organizations were offering, because we were broke. We were almost bankrupt. We couldn't do any of these things. And so we were very disheartened. But we realized soon thereafter that those are just perks and benefits. And while they're good, culture really boils down to the behaviors that we experience from each other, the way we write emails to one another, the way we speak to each other in the hallway, the way we conduct ourselves in meetings, even our chat messages and text messages imply the way we treat each other. And so culture is nothing but the culmination of the behaviors we have with one another. And so we realized if we wanted to change culture, it must begin with changing the behaviors of our organization, that people demonstrate and act with one another. And that's what gave birth to the saying, which is, if Peter Drucker says culture eats strategy for breakfast, which we wholeheartedly believe in, we say if culture eats strategy for breakfast, then behaviors eat culture for lunch, because it begins with behaviors. And that's our philosophy.
And take me into that behavior, thank you, because that process of transition to leading with love, I am sure is not something as easy as just, okay, well, we're going to switch this light and we're done and we're doing what we want to. So in terms of hearing possibly noise from the outside, the natural inclination, there may be a speed bump. So you want to default or put a traditional mode of behavior. What is that process of transition like?
Yeah, so to build a culture of love, it takes a lot of hard work and effort. It's not like such of a light switch, right? It's basically, we have a saying, overnight successes lead to daylight failures. And so this is going to take a lot of hard work and effort and trial and tribulation. And along the way, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to have a lot of challenges and issues. But at the end of the day, you're able to practice the pillars of love, 6 pillars of love, which we outline in our book, that allows you to overcome those mistakes, forgive one another, empower one another, trust one another, include one another, and practice empathy through the journey of those mistakes, and continue to learn from those mistakes and keep iteratively improving your environment of culture and your behaviors. And so we don't see it as just a switch from 0 to 1, but we see it as a journey, and a journey that takes perpetuity. There's a journey with no destination. It's a permanent state of transformation that you have to go through to be on a culture of love. You're never done. You're never going to arrive at a destination. And so it takes constant work and constant effort and continuously iterating to just become a better version of yourself every day. And that's what is meant to lead with love.
But and moving forward on that journey towards leading with love, or to leading with love more, because like you said, there's no final destination. What was that situation like to those who remain? And because it's one thing to say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do now, but I can imagine someone saying, well, they got rid of this person who was so close to me, and I saw the output that they were doing. So yes, they're talking about a different strategy now, but I'm looking over my shoulder because I'm not sure what's going to be happening a little while down the road. What was that like?
Uh, from people who have still remained at the organization, shared with me that when I first came out in my declaration that I love them all, a few days after watching this emphatic win by the University of Houston Cougar football team, they all thought I was crazy. They all thought something was wrong with me because just about 2.5, 3 weeks earlier, I had just laid off the 1/3 of the company, and here I am standing in front of the rest of the 200 plus employees, telling them I love them all. They thought I was, quote, I was on drugs. And I was fortunate enough to realize at that moment that just declaring to my team that I love them was not enough. I needed to first walk the talk. And so I went on a journey of trying to demonstrate the acts of love through simple servant leadership, tenets of putting the needs of others before myself, serving the people, and not asking somebody to do things I would not do myself, and following the various tenets of servant leadership that I had just learned in that moment in time, and begin to demonstrate the acts of love in the workplace, allowed me to first walk the talk before I was able to reintroduce the concept of culture of love, and thereby expecting the rest of my organization to also follow the lead in the culture of love. So it took me about year and a half to regain the trust, to get the grace and forgiveness from those that were still here. And it was a journey that was not, a journey of forgiveness, like just from an apology. It came through by virtue of a lot of repeated actions, repeated steps, and consistency, and also vulnerability. When there were moments of mistakes, I was able to demonstrate vulnerability by taking ownership and apologizing. And by seeing that inconsistently demonstrated, I think people then began to have faith and rebuild their trust, and join me in this journey of building a culture of love for the rest of the organization.
How do you merge that with data? And I ask that because people talk about if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So in terms of looking at things like trust, looking at things like belief, uh, buy-in, this resonates with me. And looking at, they say the data is not necessarily all, or the book says the data is not necessarily all, but do you have data to prove that thesis? And even, let me even ask, why do you say that the data isn't necessarily all?
So number one, we do have a way to measure culture today, but to back up why data alone is not necessary, it's important to realize that culture is felt before it is tangibly experienced in the business outcomes. So what we did with that is we realized that there was a way to measure experiences, because we realized that culture is nothing but our behavioral experiences with one another. So we try to look to the world of data science out there and see, hey, can you measure experiences like customer experience when you go to a restaurant or a bank or a store? And we realized that if there was a way to measure experiences, then we could translate that down to measuring behaviors of inclusion, trust, empowerment, forgiveness, vulnerability, and so forth. So what we did is we created a tool called Culture Counter, which is the first of its kind to measure cultural experiences inside of the walls of the organization. And our philosophy there is to measure cultural experiences through scenarios. So we don't say, hey, do you feel like you have trust? Those are touchy-feely questions which could be discredited. But If we say, hey, in the times of conflict, my team members trust my intent, or my team members assume good intent, then you're measuring scenario-based experiences. And then we could interpolate that to trust, to empowerment, to forgiveness, and all of the different pillars of our framework. And we're able to today use it to show organizations where cultural experiences are lower, there is business outcomes that are suffering. Like there is higher levels of attrition. People are resigning higher in departments or cultural experiences are lower. Sales numbers or goals are being missed where cultural experiences are lower. So we're able to prove with data that when cultural experiences are higher, it directly attributes to business outcomes. And we're able to do that not just firmographically, but also demographically, to be able to show that different people inside of the organization can have different experiences. Leaders may think their culture is amazing from their ivory tower, but maybe the frontline workers are not experiencing culture the same way. So we're able to bring that to light and have more objective conversations with leaders who are very data-centric, and we're able to take them through the journey of appreciating the importance of culture today than ever before.
And I think this whole conversation was kind of like a teaser for people to get to the book, to get to Softway, where the book is also available. Just like reading through the book, there are teasers, like talking about that email that you sent about the refrigerator, that inspire people to get through the entire book. But we want to thank you very much. Even before we go, just 30 seconds. Contact information, please. How do people get onto it? Because once again, I was able to hear about the book because of the interaction at QRC, Queen's Royal College. But for those who have not, how do they get onto the book?
Yes, you can go to loveasabusinessstrategy.com, the same title of the book. There's a domain name. And at that website, you can purchase a copy of our book or find resources that might help you in exploring more about the journey of how you can go on a culture of love journey for you and or your organization. But also, I am very actively present on LinkedIn. And if you just search Mohammad Anwar, Love as a Business Strategy, you will find me. But if you're also interested in our consulting services, you can go to www.softway.com.
And with that, we want to thank you so much for the work that you've done both internally and scaling out to the business, Mohammad Anwar. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.